Hello, guys.
Hi, teacher.
There. So maybe you can wait one more minute till everybody's here. Okay, guys. So yesterday we finished practicing task number 2, the second question of the speaking section. And last week we were doing task number 1, right? So we're done with task 1, with task 2. So now we're gonna today we'll start with question 3 of the speaking section, and tomorrow we'll practice. Remember, question 3 is also an integrated question, which means that you get to read something, you get to hear a certain audio, and you will have to be connecting ideas a lot, right? Now, unfortunately, I don't know if unfortunately, but starting task number 3, the content won't be as casual as you had in question 1 or 4 or 2. Task number 3 is already an academic task, which means that the content will be regarding academic topics. So it may be a little bit more complex in terms of the vocabulary probably, but it is still very, very doable, right? Nothing too complicated. So we'll see. Let's take a look. Do you guys have any questions before we start?
No questions.
All right, so task number 3. Okay, now the format of task number 3 is exactly the same as the one we saw in task 2. So you will still have to read first for 45 seconds. Then you will have to listen to something for around 1 minute. And then you have 30 seconds to prepare, 60 to speak. So everything is the same as we saw in task 2. Okay, hang on, let's see it on my screen. All right. So the format is the same as I was telling you. The first step is reading a short text. You still have the same amount of time, 45 seconds for reading. Now, obviously, in terms of content, the text that you read won't be an announcement anymore, but it will be a text on an academic subject. So it's the type of text that you would read on a book, right? And then you have to listen to a lecture in this case. So it's not a conversation anymore, it's a lecture. That means that it's a university class about the same topic that you had in the reading. So you have to listen to this lecture, and then you get 30 seconds to prepare your response and 1 minute to speak and answer the question. So you have to think of this. I want you guys to imagine yourselves like you were part of this class, because this is a university class that you're taking, let's say. So first you will read something. You will read something in your textbook, let's say, and then you will be part of the class where the professor talks more about that concept that you read in the textbook. Okay? That's kind of how this works. You are a student in a university who first reads the textbook, and then here's a more detailed explanation of that, whatever you had in the textbook. Is this okay so far? Do you guys have questions about the format? No questions?
No, teacher.
All right. So without further ado, let's get to our first example. We're going to be working on this one. So remember that you had 45 seconds to read the text. I will give you guys 1 minute because it's our first try. And then we'll talk about this. Okay, so please read this text. Okay, guys. So the first tip that I'm gonna give you, first thing that you guys have to do as soon as you get the text, first thing that you guys have to do as soon as you read the text is copy the title from the text. Okay, so as you can see, you will always have a title. In this case, it says behavior modification, and you guys have to write it down on your notes. Okay, it is really important that you guys keep the title and that you mention it later in your response. So because this is not just any title, this is the key concept. This is basically the topic, the main topic of the entire task. All right, so it's necessary that you have it on your notes. Now, the next thing is you're going to notice that in the text, you have plenty of things, right? You may have different explanations, different examples, different quotes, I don't know, anything here. But there's only one thing that you actually care about. There's one thing that matters the most, and that is the definition of that key concept. So your job when you guys are reading is first thing, copy the title, and then find the definition of that concept in the text. And the definition isn't gonna be in the entire text. It will just be in one sentence of the text. So your job is to find that sentence, identify which sentence provides you with the definition of the concept. So what do you guys think? Which sentence gives us the definition in this case? What is behavior modification?
The first.
The first, okay? Yeah, I do agree. I think it could be either the first sentence or the last sentence as well. It's the same, right? When individuals change their behavior or when individuals modify their behavior based on what they have learned about the possible consequences of their actions or of that behavior, right? Either the first or the last sentences. So what you have to do now that you have found the sentence is take notes. So you're gonna write down some of the keywords, maybe modify behavior consequences. Those will be the keywords. And that's it. Okay, you're done with the first part of the question. Is this clear? Do you guys have any questions? All right. Now, remember you have 45 seconds to do that, so you need to be fast. Now, second thing that you guys have to do is listen to the lecture. Now, what do you have in the lecture? The lecture, as I was telling you before, is going to be a further explanation of the reading, but not just any explanation. In the lecture, guys, you will always have one or two examples about that concept. So the professor in the lecture will give you one or two real world examples of how you see this concept in real life when you see behavior modification. So real world examples, applications of this concept, okay? What you have to do is pay attention for those examples, take notes while you're listening, and always keep the definition in mind. So you know already that behavior modification is when people change their behavior based on what they learn about the consequences of their actions. So you have to keep that in mind because you need to find the relationship between the examples and the concept. That it is really important that you connect ideas here. So that's why it's necessary for you guys not to forget the definition, to keep it in mind while listening to the lecture. Okay? So I'm gonna play the lecture now, and then we'll talk about the example or examples that we have in it. You guys ready to take notes? Okay.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic in a psychology class. This happens all the time with kids in schools. Say there's a little boy or girl who's just starting school. Well, they're not really used to the rules about proper behavior for a classroom. So at the beginning they might, I don't know, interrupt the teacher, walk around the classroom when they're supposed to be sitting down. You know, just misbehaving in general. Okay, but what happens? Well, the teacher gets angry with them when they act this way. They might get punished. They have to sit at their desks when everyone else is allowed to go outside and play. And they certainly don't like that. Soon, they'll learn that this kind of behavior gets them in trouble. They'll also learn that when they raise their hand to talk to the teacher and sit quietly and pay attention during class, they're rewarded. The teacher tells them she's proud of them and maybe puts little happy face stickers on their homework. Now that their behavior gets a good reaction from the teacher, the kids learn to always act this way in class and not behave the way they used to.
Okay. So that was the lecture then. Now, as you probably saw, you had an example in this case, right? It was just one example of behavior modification and how it's seen in one specific context. So we're gonna talk about it. Let's see. Oh, I think I stopped sharing my screen. How do I share? Okay. So let's see here. Who can tell me what that example was about? Who can summarize it for me?
The children in school.
All right. It was about children in school. So what happens with children?
When they begin the school, they don't know how to act. At the beginning, interrupt the teacher and don't sit down. Then the teacher gets angry and punish them. So this behavior have to change because they get in trouble. So then I start to raise the hand and make silent and not always like this because the teacher is proud of them.
Exactly. Great. So yes, that's perfect. And I like the fact that you really summarized the most important information and you didn't focus on the unimportant details. Yes, this is about children at school. And as you said, initially they don't know the rules, so they misbehave. And as a result, they get punished, right? So they learn what the consequences of their actions are. So they learn when they don't behave properly, they get this punishment. And then they change their behavior based on that learnings, right? Based on those learnings, sorry. So, and then they behave properly, they get a good reaction, and they continue behaving that way because they know that that's what gets them a good reaction. So that was the lecture, right? As you can see, do you see the connection between the lecture and the reading? Yeah, right? I think it's clear. Because at the end of the day, kids change their behavior, right? Kids modify their behavior based on experience. So if you have to choose, or if you have to, when you take notes, the information that you should have in your notes maybe would be related to what we said, right? So kids in schools, when they misbehave, they get punished, but when they also learn that when they behave properly, they get rewards, and therefore they learn to always act this way. Right? That'd be the important information. So do you guys have any questions about that so far? Okay. So now the question is the following. Using the example from the lecture, explain what behavior modification is and how it works. So as you can see, they're not really telling you summarize the reading and summarize the lecture, right? They are saying use the example from the lecture to explain the concept of behavior modification. So that means that you have to do that, right? You have to explain the concept, but not just with the definition, but with the example too. So technically you have now 30 seconds to prepare your responses. And during this time, as we were saying, you could do different things, right? This is the same as for task 2. So probably yesterday that you guys were practicing, you saw that you were maybe trying to do different things. You were trying out different strategies when preparing. So you could organize your notes, you could connect your ideas, you could just think, you could start practicing the speaking. I don't know. One thing that I suggest you do during your preparation time is connect the ideas. So in your notes, you should have the definition, right? When individuals change their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior. So what you could do is try to connect this definition that you have on your notes with the information you have from the lecture. So in this case, for example, individuals are the kids in school, right? Their behavior is how they behave in class, right? So it could be a good behavior, a proper behavior, or it could be misbehavior, right? And maybe you can also give me some examples of good behavior would be raising the hands, I don't know, sitting quietly, paying attention. Misbehavior, walking around the classroom or like interrupting the teacher. That's the behavior. What they have learned about the consequences of that behavior, well, the consequences are good reaction or bad reaction, right? Good and bad reactions from the teacher. And you can also mention some details. So good reactions would be maybe happy face stickers on their homeworks, teacher telling them that she's proud. Same thing for bad reaction, right? So they're punished, they're not allowed to play. I don't know. And then they change their behavior. So they go from from not knowing the rules, from misbehaving to behaving properly. So this is kind of what you can be doing during that preparation time, right? And you don't necessarily have to do it like I'm doing it right now on like whole mess, writing it down, but you can just think about it, right? So think about who the individuals are, how they change, what behavior this is, what consequences we're talking about. Try to connect the idea. Okay? Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions about that? Nope. All right. So now you would have 60 seconds to speak, 60 seconds to answer the question. Let's see what to do during those 60 seconds. So you're gonna spend 10 seconds, and it's the same as task 2 for your introduction, and the rest should be for the body of your response. So when I say 10 seconds in your introduction, what you guys need to do in your introduction is mention the title. That's why it was important to copy the title, and mention the definition of the title. So one way you can do that is say something like, according to the reading passage, behavior modification occurs when individuals change their behavior based on experience, right? So I am mentioning the title, behavior modification, and I am mentioning the definition, right? And make sure that you give credit, that you don't talk about these ideas like these were your own ideas, because they're not, right? So it would be wrong for you to start and say, behavior modification happens when people change their behavior based on models. So when you do that, you're not referring to the reading passage, right? You're not acknowledging that this information you got from the reading passage. So you have to, one way or the other, give credit, okay? So that's your introduction, 10 seconds. And then you have to move on to the body of your response, in which you're gonna summarize the lecture, always emphasizing the important information related to the concept. So you could have a short transition where you say, in the lecture, the professor gives the example of kids in schools. He explains that, and then you explain the example. You don't really need a conclusion, but let's say that you have some extra time and you finished early for some reason, then you can go with a short conclusion and say something like, in summary, this is a glaring example of behavior modification, right? So again, your introduction, first 10 seconds. Then you have your transition to move on to the lecture. You explain the example, always making sure to connect the ideas with the ones in the reading. That's the body. And then if you have extra time, you go with a conclusion. Is this okay? Is this clear? You guys have questions? Is there any word you don't know? Anything that's not clear? Guys, so I'm gonna do it so that you can have a sample response and you can see mainly how I manage my time, right? How I use my time, how I organize the information according to the time I have, maybe a little bit of the content, and you can give me some tips too, so you can see if there's a way that I can maybe do it better, or maybe there's something you would do differently. So let's see. According to the reading passage, behavior modification occurs when individuals modify or change their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of their actions. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of schools and children at schools. He explains that initially, when a child is new, they may not know the rules in the classroom, so they are probably going to misbehave initially. They may, for example, interrupt the teacher, they may be walking around the classroom, and as a result, the professor gets mad and probably gives them a punishment. Therefore, they learn that this behavior gets them punished, and they start changing their behavior. They may behave properly now. They start sitting quietly and paying attention, and they notice that the professor, as a result, gives them a reward. And that's how the kids modify or change their behavior based on what they know their consequences are. Right? So I actually was missing like 2 seconds. Wasn't managing my time as good as I probably could have, because I honestly wanted to explain more. But at the end of the day, I was trying to mention the most important parts. Maybe I mentioned too many details. But basically, that's it, right? So 10 seconds for your introduction, and then the rest goes for the body of your response. Honestly, maybe I would have used more transitions. There's always a chance to use transitions, like maybe to show the contrast between the good and bad behavior. I could have said, on the other hand, when kids behave properly, right? Therefore, they learn and they change their behavior. So maybe I was missing the transitions. I would add them if I had the chance to like go back. But either way, it's just a sample response, right? Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions? No? No? All clear? So one more thing, because we're gonna practice a little bit today. But before we start doing that, another thing that I really like about this task and about the speaking section in general is that not only do you know what to expect in terms of structure, so not only do you know that you will always have a title and a definition and 1 or 2 examples, but aside from that, you also know what to expect in terms of content. So this is really great for being prepared. You already know what to expect. So these are the most common topics that you guys can have in task number 3. As you can see in this pie here, most of the time, around 90% of the time, you get one of these 3 topics: psychology, biology, or business concepts. Right? So that's like almost 90% of the time. Now, the one that we had about behavior modification, was it psychology, biology, business, or was it something else?
Psychology.
Exactly. So psychology works just like that. Honestly, it's very similar to what we see. And you will see tomorrow when we're practicing. But you usually have one example when you get psychology. It's usually gonna be a story from the professor's own life So I don't know, maybe the professor experienced something like that. So it's an example from the professor's own life. Sometimes you have like an example like the one we have right now. So it's an example in general about a specific group of people, a specific context. And sometimes you have experiments. So that's maybe the most complicated type of example you can have. But we'll see tomorrow. And when you have psychology, they talk about the way that our brain works, right? The way that our mind works. So the way we learn, the way that we experience our feelings, emotions, the way that our memory works, the way we interact with each other. That's the type of thing you get with psychology. Now, biology, I gotta say, at least personally, maybe because I'm not an expert in biology, but that's the one that I find like the hardest because of the vocabulary, maybe. So when you have biology, it's usually animals or plants. You never get human biology, luckily. And, it's usually just about like the way that animals have adapted to certain changes or the way that plants have adapted to certain changes, defense mechanisms of animals and plants, the way that they have evolved, the way that they have that they relate to their habitats or to other species, different life processes, and the way that they organize. So usually you have things like that. And business, I think it's just as easy as psychology topics. You usually have something like advertisement or marketing techniques. And, it is a really hardcore business. It's quite easy, I would say. But what you do need to have is some vocabulary because business usually, there's a reason why sometimes in some books you have like business English, right? Because it has a different vocabulary. You need to learn a couple of words related to business, nothing too complicated, but it is important that you do so that you don't feel frustrated when you encounter a business topic and you find words that you're not familiar with. Okay? So, how is this important? Why is this important? Why am I mentioning this? You guys need to practice and you need to become familiarized with these type of topics, okay? So for psychology, for example, you can maybe watch some TED Talks, right? There's a lot of TED Talks that are related to psychology concepts. So make sure that you watch a few of them. Make sure that you read articles, psychology articles. Make sure that you read about psychological experiments. So that is going to give you the vocabulary and also that's going to get you used to this type of content, right? For biology, something that works really well is watching these National Geographic videos. So these are like short 4 or 5 minute long videos that gives you good vocabulary and that again, gets you used to this content. And for business, you can maybe read or you can listen to these podcasts that you have like plenty of them. So it's important that you guys practice with those topics, all right? So that's why it's important to know what topics you have. And of course, nothing's perfect, nothing's ever 100% certain. So there's also a chance that you have a different topic. And this is like very rare, but it happens. So 10% of the time you can have something like art, history, sociology, geology, literature, and so forth. It is uncommon, but it could happen. So it's important to say that you can have one of these. And honestly, they're not too complicated. I would say biology is always the hardest one, at least for me, I think it depends. But, we're also going to practice using these other topics. Okay, guys? But in general, business, psychology, and biology are the most common ones. Okay, is that clear? Do you guys have questions about this?
Yes, only one. There is any rule or any way to difference this kind of exercise against the yesterday?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the content is the difference, right? So the one we did yesterday, task number 2, is about university life. So in the reading, you don't have an article. You don't have, I mean, you don't have like something that you would read in a textbook, but instead it's like a letter, right? Or an announcement. And you know that it's referring to a change made in some certain universities. So the listening is also different because in this case, you will listen to a lecture. So it's a lot more formal. It's a professor that's speaking and explaining an academic topic. But in the previous one, in task number 2, you will listen to a conversation between two students, right? So it's different in that sense. The format is the same, but the content is different, right? The format is the same in terms that you will still have to read and listen and then summarize, but what you have to listen to and what you have to read is different. So, I mean, that's how you can differentiate the both of them. But in your test, they will go in order, right? So you will first have task number 1, then you have task 2, and then you get the third one, which is this one. So you know which one is which. Is that okay? Did I answer your question? Or I don't know if you meant something else.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
Okay, sure thing. Any other question? Okay. So let's continue practicing. I think we have time, right? We are finishing earlier today. We've already done psychology, so let's do business and biology. So that everything is uh, okay, guys. So this is the one we're gonna do now. You're gonna do it if you want. Okay, I'm not gonna force anybody to try. And if you really don't feel ready yet, we can do it together as well. Okay, so remember that you have 45 seconds to read the text. Give me a second, please. I don't know why I cannot. And very bad. Okay. So please begin reading the text now.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a marketing class.
Nowadays, something you notice more and more is television commercials that are made specifically for certain television programs. So, let's say a company wants to sell a telephone, a cell phone. Now, during TV shows that young people watch, shows with pop music or teen serials, they create a commercial that emphasizes how fun the phone is. You know, the phone has bright colors and they show kids having a good time with their friends. And, well, the company wants the kids watching TV at this time to want to buy this phone that's made especially for them. But the same company will make a different commercial to be shown during, say, a program about business or a business news show. Now, for this group of people, business people, the company will have to show how efficient their phone is, how it can handle all business easily, and maybe even save money. And here's the thing. It's basically the same phone. The company has just made two different commercials to appeal to different groups of people.
Okay. Now the question says, using the professor's examples, explain the advertising technique of target marketing. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. So does anyone want to try? By any chance?
Teacher.
Okay, great, Victor, of course. So, okay. Please go ahead now.
According to the passage, target marketing is defined as the strategy of advertisement to a smaller group of people, to very specific audiences. In the lecture, the professor gave the example of how to sell a cell phone to two different groups of people. He explains that a company sells a cell phone, the same cell phone, but they did two different commercials. One that will show during a kids program to emphasize some characteristics that are very appreciated for kids. And then he did another different commercial in order to show different characteristics to a business channel, in order to emphasize the characteristics to business people, so they want to sell to the two different groups of people.
Okay, Victor, well done. That was really, really well done. So I don't think I have any comments. You mastered the task, you mastered the structure, you had a great introduction, you had the correct definition, and you summarized the examples, because in this case it was like one example with two details. I mean, perfectly fine. Both details were really summarized. You focused on important information and not on the details of like what type of programs those are or like the specific characteristics, but you really focus on what was important. How this company created two different types of commercials to advertise the product to different groups of people, right? To different specific audiences. This is in the definition. So I really have no comments. Well done. I think from the start to end it was good.
Thank you.
What do you guys think? Do you have any comments? Do you have any suggestions? Does anyone have anything to say? Guys? So in that case, let's do another one. Biology. Let's all right. let's do this one. So it will be the same. Okay, no, this is not the one. Here, you will have 45 seconds to read the text. Right? So let's listen.
Now listen to part of a lecture from a biology class.
There's a large tropical insect called the peanut bug. Yes, like the peanuts that you eat. And the peanut bug's front wings are colored so that they blend in with their surroundings. But its back wing,
Now listen to part of a lecture from a biology class.
there's a large tropical insect called the peanut bug. Yes, like the peanuts that you eat. And the peanut bug's front wings are colored so that they blend in with their surroundings. But its back wings, which are usually closed and hidden, have these bright, colorful spots on them. And when the peanut bug's attacked, it suddenly opens its back wings, and out pop these big, bright colors. And that surprises the predator and gives the peanut bug a chance to get away. And then you have a butterfly called the morpho butterfly. And parts of the morpho butterfly's wings are very shiny. They reflect a lot of sunlight. When this butterfly is resting, this shiny part of its wings is hidden. Now, morpho butterflies are often attacked by birds. So when a bird approaches, the morpho flies away. And when the morpho flaps its wings, all the bird can see are flashes of light reflected from the morpho's wings. Those flashes of light make it very difficult for the bird to follow the morpho, and the morpho is usually able to get away.
Okay, guys, the question says, using the examples from the peanut bag and the morpho butterfly, explain the concept of revealing coloration. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. So is there anyone who wants to try this task? In this case, we have two examples, right? So template is the same, but maybe here's like a slight change that you can do to the template. So instead of saying in the lecture, the professor gives the example of, since you have two examples, you could say in the lecture, the professor gives two examples, right? And then you explain the first, explain the first example, and then in addition, and then explain the second, right? So that's like a way to separate the two examples. So you don't end up like talking only about one or making it look like it's one. So does anyone want to try? No? Then I give you guys any time. Nobody? Should we do it together? Okay. So if we talk about it, first thing, the reading, right? The introduction. So in the introduction, you should mention the topic, revealing coloration, and a short definition. Now, honestly, I gotta say that in this case, the definition is pretty much everywhere, right? So you kind of have to find a way to summarize. So revealing coloration is what? It's a defensive strategy.
To protect
Involve-
from predators.
Exactly. Yes, you could say it's a strategy that animals use to protect themselves from predators. Honestly, the definition that you would have to use is the second one, right? You know, these words, like what is known as, it's known as, it's defined as, it occurs when. Those are the words, the type of words that you can use as red flags, and you know that the definition should be there. So in this case, the best one you could use is revealing coloration is a defensive strategy involving the use of coloration, right? That's like a one way to summarize. So that's what you could have in your introduction. You know, according to the passage, revealing coloration is a defensive strategy that animals use involving the use of coloration. Now, in the lecture, the professor provides two examples. First, he talks about what was the first animal? The peanut bag, right? You have it in the question. So first, he talks about the peanut bag. What happens with the peanut bag? How does the peanut bag uses revealing coloration?
Show the bug wings that break bright and give them the opportunity to go away.
Exactly, perfect, good summary. So the morpho butterfly then has the top wings, I think they are the top of the wings, they blend in with the environment, right? So they are colors that are not noticeable among the environment. But the back of the wings have these bright spots, bright colors. So when a predator is approaching, they open their wings, and like the predator is caught by surprise, they get distracted with the bright spots and then they go away, right? Well, they don't go away, but the peanut bag has a chance to escape, to go away. And what about the other animal, the morpho butterfly?
The wings shining with the sun.
Exactly. The wings shine, they reflect the sunlight. I don't know.
Uh-huh. And the wings flashes the light, and it's difficult to the birds from them.
Exactly. Yes, that's it. The morpho butterfly has these wings that reflect light, and when the predator is coming, then they get reflected by the light, then they have a chance to escape as well. It's kind of the same idea, but the details are a little bit different. So, with that being said, now that we've talked about it, does anyone want to try put everything together? Okay, great. So, go ahead.
According to the passage, revealing coloration is defined as one defensive strategy that many animals use to protect themselves from predators. In the lecture, the professor provides two examples. First, he explained that peanut bag have a bike wings that breathe bright with the colors and give them the opportunity to go away for the predators. In addition, we have the morphle butterfly that the wings of the morphle butterfly shining with the sun, and these flashes the light to the predators like a beard, and it's difficult found them.
Great. So the light flashes and it's difficult for the birds to see. Great. Honestly, that was a great response to Alejandra. Well done. So you summarized the two examples in a short time, even because you were taking too long in the introduction, right? Go faster with your intro. Always have that prepared. If you have to summarize a little bit more the definition, that's okay too. And I don't think I have any comments. Everything was correct. Be careful with this word, predators. Remember, not predators. You're gonna probably use it a lot. Predators and prey. You're gonna use it a lot. But well done. So that's it. Now we've done psychology, biology, and business. What do you guys think? Do you guys have questions? Which one was the easiest one?
The first one.
First one, right? I think we went from easiest to hardest. But you guys will see sometimes psychology topics can get difficult too, especially when not because of the content, but sometimes they get longer, especially when you have like experiments. Tomorrow we'll be doing that too. And in this case, this one was a little bit harder, not necessarily because of the content either, but because of the length as well, right? Because you have two examples, unlike the other ones. So you have to focus on more things. You also have to focus on like making it on time, summarizing the information more. But not necessarily. In this case, not all the biology topics contain two examples. Sometimes it's just one animal or one plant. But we'll see. Okay, tomorrow you will have a better understanding when we get through other questions too. So, do you guys have any questions before we go today? Guys, so don't forget to join tomorrow. We'll be practicing. And before you go, please, if you could fill out the survey, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye, teacher.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.
Bye.